Hello, everyone, and welcome to the midweek program at the J.C. Raulston Arboretum. My name is Blake, and I'm the education assistant here at the Arboretum. And today we are on our staff building porch because, well, there's a hurricane on the way. That's just a minor detail, but we've got a program for you today about how to pick plants in the nursery. So we've got our nursery technician, Sophia McCusker, here, as well as our Director of Horticulture, Paige, as well as a whole bunch of plants that they pulled from our nursery that they are going to talk about, kind of scrutinize a bit, tell you what you need to do in a garden center to make sure you're picking the best plant so you're set up for success in your own garden. Alrighty, those of you joining us on YouTube, please like this video and subscribe to our channel, and feel free to leave a comment down below. And with the announcements out of the way, I will get out of the way and pass things over to Greg and Sophia to teach us what to look for in plants at the nursery.
Hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning in. We intended to do this, as Blake said, in one of our hoop houses or down in our sunpad nursery, which would have been ideal. But the weather has made us kind of question our judgment on doing that. And of course, it looks like the sun might pop out here in a little bit, but better safe than sorry.
I was just thinking, I think we just guaranteed that it's not going to storm.
That's
We're
okay.
not going to get thunder.
That's okay.
We're here.
I don't want the thunder. The topic at hand today is talking about how to the pleasures and perils of selecting plants in the garden center and nursery. There's a whole host of things that are out there when you're looking for new plants for your garden, for additions. As Blake alluded, one of our big programs that we do is geared towards people that are new coming here. So what we're going to try to do today is talk about some of those things that will help you pick things that are not so much the right plant for the garden. We might touch on that a little bit, but what to look for when you're shopping for plants. What's going to be the best use of your money and hard-earned dollars when you're selecting plants. We ask you to be kind with some of our harsh judgments today. Most of this stuff has come from our nursery.
I've been growing this out specially for this program.
Yes. With all the bad things that are going on. We have inherited some plants, and we'll talk about those as we kind of go on. But I think a logical place to start, and I'm going to throw you to the wolves, is to talk about how these things start, not just with our growing center, but any plant that you're going to buy from a nursery. It has to start out in some form or fashion. We had a little seedling.
I had a cutting pulled
We had
up.
a little seedling.
So it's not a seedling, Greg, it's a cutting?
Cutting. Most anything that you buy, when it comes in a pot, when you're buying it from the garden center, it started out in this form or fashion. Usually, some cases it's a seedling, but usually.
So we've got cuttings here. So this is a cutting that we're going to pot up. I'm not sure this is a chrysanthemum, but that most of a bunch of these plants are cuttings. This was a cutting that I took in June. I brought this up because this is almost ready to go out. I'm not sure if it's going to go on the cart or in one of our sales, but pretty much everything, a lot of the stuff here started as a cutting. And you can see the rooted, like it's rooted. This is a really well-rooted cutting. This could pot up and fill out and push new growth in a month and be ready to go in a small container like this and into someone else's garden.
Yep.
We have a couple seedlings here, and I'll point out a few things about those. So this is a taxodium seedling. It's got a little, we'll talk more about weeds here in a minute, but it's got a little friend here that doesn't belong. This has been in this pot too long, so we'll jump right in here. First thing we'll talk about is the root flare on trees. This is really important. I don't think this is it's not as prominent with cuttings grown trees.
But that's where all the problems start.
But that's where planting depth is generally where a lot of our problems start, with cutting grown trees or potentially grafted trees.
Yep.
So this is a seedling grown, and you can see that there's a taper up. There's a distinct flare down at the bottom of the base, and these are a little small to see. But this is a Cercis seedling that could probably be potted up.
Yeah.
Definitely be potted up. This is actually planted a little too deep. But what I like to do is peel that media back until you can see this has a really distinct flare. If you can see that. So the base where the roots start coming out, so the roots start about here, and you can see it flares, and then it kind of tapers up to the rest of the tree.
This area on a tree and shrubs is very sensitive to soil being around it. It could be prone to rot. It could be avenues for diseases to go through. Insects and other things can get in there and kind of girdle that. And what usually happens is you take a cutting or a seed-grown thing, you move it to the next stage of pot that it's going to go in, and you put more soil in there. And then you take that to the next stage and you put more soil in there. And the next thing you know, something like this has soil that's piled up that high. And that's bad. So looking for that when you're buying plants in a nursery or a garden center, try to find where that flare is. And, you know, I don't say walk away at that point, but this is something that you can address when you are going to plant it. But that's kind of a first sign that they're paying attention and they're growing good quality plants. Is you're gonna be able to see that root flare. Now, we're not saying go to all your local garden centers and call them out on that, because this light media is easy to move and manipulate, and that's an important thing that we have stressed here multiple times. Is when you get to that planting stage and disturbing those root systems.
And these seedlings were potted up. They're ready to be potted up again, and we can address that too with potting up. Because even in our nursery, we've got interns and volunteers, and I'm not checking every single plant. So
and a large volume of stuff.
And a large volume, so it can be hard to check every single one. So yeah, like Greg said, even if it is a little deep, go ahead and if you can address it. It's not something that's the end all be all.
Yeah.
So I don't know. You might know more about this. So this is a woody. This is a Calliston.
Mm-hmm.
This one looked really good in the nursery as far as like. I think this is ready to go get planted.
It's vigorous. It's got nice white healthy roots.
Yep.
They're not girdling inside of the pot. That's at a good stage to.
So you can lift them out and see those. They'll be able to spread out easily when you dig your planting hole. If you dig it, you want to dig it a little bit bigger, hopefully, than the pot. But if you've got nice, loose garden soil, this is just going to root into it and
it's
go
going to be
crazy.
happy.
This is another. So this is a cutting, and you can see that it's a cutting, so it's not going to have that root flare, and that's probably planted about okay. It's probably a little bit deep,
okay.
But it's okay.
Let me show the extreme of the next level version of that. So we've got styrax here, and this has also kind of been in the pot for a little bit too long. If you take a shot at that root flare area, it looks like a pole going straight into the ground. So there's no taper there at all. So I like to tell people when they're shopping to kick the tires. When I'm shopping, I'll take things off and look for things like this, to where that's been in the pot way too long. And that's going to require a little bit of extra care to, when you're planting this, to kind of really rip all this up. And most root systems can handle that. It just adds a little layer of stress to something that's already going to be stressed. It's been worked through the nursery industry. It's been watered a lot, maybe fertilized, hasn't been potted up regularly, and it's going to be plumped into a new home somewhere and hopefully get taken care of, but maybe not exactly to its needs. So paying attention to that as you're stepping things up from that cutting or that seedling is important. And most nurseries just don't have time. They're rotating things through relatively quickly. But when you're planting this, that's when you can pay attention to moving that soil away from this area. If we were going to step this up, we would do all that. We would loosen up these roots. We would try to find more of a root flare there and loosen that up, put it in a bigger pot. Sophia and I are of the mindset that's ready to go into the garden this fall. We'll address those cultural issues at that time frame.
If this weren't going into the garden, this would be stepped up.
Yep.
So, and one thing I'll do when I step up, and I like to think about when I buy plants, is whatever plants the nursery has, or whatever weeds the nursery has, you're probably going to bring them home with you. So you can kind of tell by what your weed palette is in your yard, what your nursery has an issue with. Mm-hmm. But I like to pull away. Don't be afraid. All the time I have people be like, oh, well, I don't want to, break damaged roots. it's not going to hurt it. There are a few super sensitive plants that you might want to be careful, like Daphnes, I know are super sensitive. You may not want to rip those apart, but some of these other herbaceous perennials, you could cut all of the roots off. And as long as you've got a rhizome or a bulb or, you know, some other structure to support it, they'll come back. You may need to baby them a little bit more, but most of those, and this is a good practice to do. Sorry, my mind's going faster than my mouth.
That never happens.
Pulling this away will also help eliminate some of those seeds.
Yeah.
Because the seed bank is usually in the top inch of soil, inch or so. So if you pull that top layer off and just, you know, put it in your compost or send it away to, you know, with your yard waste or whatever, that will help keep the weeds out of the garden.
And we use rice hulls here, which is exactly what I'm saying it is. These are just the hulls that are left over when rice is processed. And we top dress a lot of our pots with this medium to help keep the weeds at bay. In theory, the weeds won't germinate in there because there's not enough organic matter for them to do their thing. And it's a little bit hydrophobic, so doesn't have a lot of moisture content, which weed seeds needs to germinate. And I think it helps us out a lot. That's something that you can buy in small bags if you're doing some of your own potting up. It's something that I've had colleagues that have switched me over to using them, and I think they do help out quite a bit. It's better than using herbicide or having to hand pull a lot of stuff. And I don't know, I think it's helped us a little bit.
I think it's helped us a lot. I haven't had the best coverage. I haven't gone through as we've repotted over the summer, but it's definitely something I'll do over the winter so that we can kind of keep down that weed pressure in the nursery. It also prevents light. The rice hulls prevent light, and the seeds need germination for light, or need light for germination.
Who's next?
This is a good one. I noticed this is like a 3-for-1. So this you can see is we got a friend here. And I noticed this too. This is a good point to make. You can see that this weed is the host for aphids. So this plant, you usually don't see aphids on a canna lily, but this is a host that would potentially, you know, bring a pest, not only bring the weed into your garden, but also bring a potential pest that you don't want to deal with. I don't have a ton of issues with aphids. They tend to figure themselves out with...
It's self-select.
Yeah.
Might cut that off.
So this is something, I brought this up because this is a good example of a herbaceous plant that I probably won't put on the cart, but we're going to wrestle it out here because it would be fine to plant, but it needs some surgery. There we go. So what I'm going to do with this is pull these rhizomes apart. And again, you don't have to be delicate with these. If it's got that rhizome and a little node, it's going to come back. Pull away this really thick matted soil. So everything that we pot up here is in this pine bark media. So it's pretty coarse, but after it's been in the pot for a year or two, it breaks down and compacts. And then it will also get hydrophobic, which means water can't get into it. So I would go like for this thing. My plan with this was to divide it.
What a mess.
That's one way to get rid of the weed seeds. But I can divide, my point is I can divide this into 5 or 6 plants and I'll repot them. But like, it's not gonna hurt these cannas to lose that root mass. A lot of people are afraid, like I said, to break roots, but the way that these roots are lined up in that thick bundle, they're just gonna get pot bound and hydrophobic. And
it's gonna girdle.
It's just gonna girdle and then they're gonna die and then you've got rotten stuff. So they can take it, most plants.
Herbaceous stuff in particular.
Yeah.
Plant quality is something to look for too. And this is one that we inherited from another plant sale. And this is not as a result of our neglect. It was in a house that was basically empty. and we kind of rescued them and have kind of slowly been nursing them along. But if you look at that and you see the foliage is a little bit stunted, the color is kind of off.
Something's chewing on leaves here.
Something's nibbling on the leaves, probably lacewing bugs, which affect azaleas quite a bit.
It doesn't look like lacewing.
Something's going on.
Somebody's eating it.
Somebody's chewing it.
It's got some weeds.
It's got some weeds in there. We can tell this has been in the pot, as Sophia was just alluding to. That soilless mix has been in here for a long time. And another thing I tell people to do, you can kind of smell it, and it smells kind of anaerobic. You can see the water coming off of it.
Greg, when you pulled that out of the pot, I saw that color, that dark black color. That means anaerobic in my mind.
And it smells BAD.
Yeah.
So, and in this case, you'll see here, if you roll it around, I don't see any of the azalea roots here.
No.
These white roots are this weed.
Yep.
So this is
most of what we're looking at is weed root.
Yeah, I don't see any azalea roots in there.
And if you can see that in the camera, you can see my fingers by the azalea root. It's brown and unhealthy looking, as opposed to, something that had nice white healthy roots. That's what you want to look for. So when I say kick the tires, that's what I mean. Get it out of the pot. Look for these white healthy roots. Smell it. If it smells anaerobic, you might want to walk away and go someplace else. But this is just not taking care of nursery stock, and that happens, to the best of nurseries.
That azalea, I think, has been in the nursery. It has been in a nursery, so not being consistently fertilized, not being, pruned back. If you pruned this back, it could have reflushed. This is probably its third year.
At least.
At least.
I mean, the pot, the ink is wearing off the pot.
Yeah.
So look at that. And this is a completely different type of azalea, but that reeks of vigor. That looks nice and healthy to me. The color is a nice green. I don't see any chewed up leaves. It hasn't, the pot isn't saturated. It doesn't feel super heavy. I'll go ahead and pick it out. The roots probably are actually there. A little bit harder to see, but a much more healthier option, and something that you want to look for when you're selecting stuff. Not a very good color. This is kind of the color that you're looking for, and something that's nice and vigorous.
And a point, I see a lot of people go into, they'll come up to the plant cart or out shopping, and they'll go for the plants with blooms on them. So for some things, if they've got a long bloom period, sure, why not get the ones with blooms? But something like this that's only going to bloom twice a year, or inconsistently throughout the year, if you get things before they break bud, you get to enjoy the entire flower season, the entire season of that flower. I see people picking out, amaryllis and daffodils that are fresh, they're big, beautiful buds. But I'm like, they're gonna pop open and be gone, or they're already open and it's just they're gonna go away.
And another talking point, an example of vigor. Yes, we're getting close to cooler weather. We haven't had any of that yet, so there's no reason. This is a landscape rose. No reason for this to be this color at this time of the year. It's probably been in this pot for too long. Any nutrient value that was left in this pine bark is gone. It's starting to compact. Any of the slow release fertilizer that was put in at the nursery is long gone. And the vigor of this is not so healthy. So you're already getting a plant that's in some kind of stress.
The pine bark is pretty neutral as far as it does not have a lot of nutrients in it. So it requires all of that slow release that we use. The slow release, my guess is what happened with this rose. Now that you're talking mess about it. My guess is what happened with this rose is we put a 3-month fertilizer on it instead of a 9 or 10-month fertilizer. So that fertilizer has already run its course and run out. The fertilizer we use is a slow release. It's these little prills. I like Osmocote. It's the name brand. It's just what we use. There are homeowner, sizes, but it is temperature sensitive. So I think over 55 degrees, it starts releasing that nitrogen. And occasionally when we get the really hot weather that we've had, it will dump all its nitrogen all at once.
And these have been sitting on our sun pad where it's 5,000 degrees, It's been hot this summer, so that fertilizer has long since done what it was supposed to do, and it's not benefiting the plant at all. Something to kind of back up and maybe mention is why do we use pine bark vines? Why do they use them in the nursery? It's cheap and readily available. It allows the nurserymen to move the soil around relatively easy. It's easy to mix with other things, and it also helps to water plants a couple times a day in the nursery. What they want to do is produce from that seedling stage or that cutting stage something as quickly as they can, and if they can water it and get nutrients into it quickly, it's going to move its way down the chain to a saleable size relatively quickly. And pine bark vines work really, really well for that. And we use them for the same reason. We can get them readily available. They're easy to use in the cart behind us.
They're relatively lightweight compared to your soil.
Yeah.
It's also a byproduct. There's a lot of different things that the pine is used for, and this is just a happy byproduct.
So a lot of times a waste material, but it's organic. It can break it down, and it works really, 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 really well.
And it lasts about a year to be consistent. You can certainly keep stuff in it longer, but about a year is when I see stuff start to deteriorate. That's a good one. I grabbed this one because...
You don't like it?
I actually don't mind it. I could top it off and it would be okay.
Why did we bring this?
Because it is very top heavy. So you can see it's got that mushroom effect.
Pot to plant ratio?
Pot to plant ratio is bad. It has been kind of hydrophobic since I got it. These were a little overgrown and shaggy when we got them in the spring. It's an abelia.
We spent a lot of time standing these things up.
Yep, they flop in the wind. It's an abelia, so it will probably bounce back. But at this point, it's been on the pad all summer. And if this were mine, I would shave it all back because it's going to flush and
get it in the ground.
It's also, you can see, you notice the other pots were sort of falling apart. That's something I look for too, is if it's just a solid mass, it's just not good. It's just bad.
It needs to be stepped up or planted.
Yeah.
And with this much growing area, leaf tissue and stuff, this guy needs to be planted.
This root ball at this scale is not going to be able to absorb water.
Not with all this pulling.
Not with all that. I mean, literally sitting on top of it. There's no way for water. We have overhead irrigation. There's not really a way for this to get good water.
And this is a good example too. I know there's always a lot of discussion about putting multiple cuttings in one pot to get a bigger plant. And this looks like it was at least 2 cuttings of an abelia. And that's okay with a shrub, but those 2 root systems are gonna compete with each other to a certain degree. And that's part of why there's so much, the crown of that is so much bigger than the base. You take those 2 plants with all the energy to produce a root system and put them in step them up in small pots, it's going to be hard for them to kind of compete. Yeah. And there are some things, I know some hollies are prone to where one of those might fail. So you might have a whole section of this die for some reason, maybe something was wrong with that root system or one of those cuttings gets girdled. But a lot of folks do that because they want a nice big kind of healthy bulked up plant.
Okay, we've told you a lot about bad things to look for. We could talk about nice things.
Let's talk about nice things.
I have nice things in the nursery too, guys.
We have lots of nice things down there.
This is an Itea. I wanted to bring this because kind of what
Greg
was just mentioning. This is a suckering shrub. So this is one cutting, but it's already thrown up a second sucker. And that's a really good sign in this case because it's just going to continue to send up lovely little suckers. This is about perfect. Spoiler alert, this might go into the fall. This might be in the fall sale. The roots are a little shallow. Ideally, I'd like to see them all around the pot. So when you lift that pot out, it's all around the pot, but still fairly loose. Like I was saying with that media, maybe it's not going in the fall sale now.
I might be going home.
All that media can come off. And that's that's kind of what I look for, because it doesn't, once that breaks down.
These are all healthy roots.
Those are all healthy roots. Yeah. Roots come in lots of shapes, sizes, colors. For this plant, that kind of yellowy root is healthy. You can see at the end, it's at the very tip, it's got little white tips that you probably can't see. Hey, what do you want to talk about? I don't know what I'm talking about.
I don't know. We have a lot of stuff here.
Here's one. So this has a lot of root to plant ratio. This is an Amorphophallus. So this has that big, is it a corum? Corum? Yeah. It's got that big root system, or that big structure underground. I could pull pretty much all of these roots off and it would probably be fine. It would just shoot more roots out because it's got that stored energy. Yeah.
Healthy, happy.
Healthy, happy, white roots.
Freshly potted up. Another cutting here, and some of the typical things that we will grow here for plant cart, plant sale, that sort of thing. And again, just looking for those nice kind of healthy roots, not in the pot too deep. And that can all be adjusted. This will probably step up to another size, don't you think?
We'll probably go in the giveaway.
Yeah.
A lot of this stuff now. Right now, I'm in the phase of potting things up for the giveaway. So, spoiler alert: you might see some of these in the giveaway.
It's always good stuff.
This I brought up. This is a Tricertus. Yeah, this is a Tricertus. I brought this up because it kind of looks scrappy, but you can see there's new growth coming up. So just because parts of it don't look awesome, especially this is more so with perennials. With woodies, they're a little bit less forgiving, but with perennials, if you got white buds and white roots, you're good to go. This is not ready. You can see how loose that media still is, and the roots, when I pull something out to check to see if it should go out on the plant cart yet, I like to lift it out, and if it can't lift out nicely, but not be like a wrestling match, it's probably not quite ready to go.
Not quite ready to go out.
It's not quite ready. But a few, maybe 6 weeks, maybe right about the giveaway time, this will be ready to go.
And this is the time of the year when perennials are starting to that decline down, and this might not look so happy, but usually this is there's good things going on.
Yeah, kind of know your plant. Yeah. That's a good point of like know your plant, know what it should look like for this time of year.
Yep.
You know, this is azalea is not a great thing, but like you might find something on the discount rack because the foliage is starting to look bad. Well, it's August and the foliage is going to look bad anyway. Right. But you could find some really cool plants. They don't look good anymore. They're not going to sell them, so they're going to discount them.
Yeah. And then it's about to be time to plant here in a little bit too.
Yeah,
so
then
you're getting
it's
discounts on.
Perfect time for planting, and I know Mark hates the discount plant, but I love a good discount plant.
You never know what you're going to find. Something I forgot to mention that just scanned across my brain is when you're shopping for plants, most garden centers, most nurseries will have shade stuff in shaded protected areas, some that's in the sun and in an area where it needs to be sun. When those things are mixed together, you can run into problems. So when you're shopping, if you're looking for shade garden plants, if they're not taking care of them and keeping shade over them, that's a sign that they're just not doing all the right things to keep those plants healthy. And if you're going to invest in those, that's something to look for. I know these guys were in a pretty sunny spot. And there was something else that we had brought up, that those red buds, whatever happened to those? They got taken.
We didn't talk about that either. Our little friends chewing on this one.
So these were cutting seedlings.
Those were seedlings.
These were seedlings. They like a little bit of shade as they're getting established. You can see that the leaves are kind of curled and cupped out, and I think that's just from them being in some pretty intense sun. Something else that's kind of interesting that we see this time of the year, there's a leaf cutter bee that likes red buds. I don't know if it's because they're easy to cut or if it's the angle or whatever, but all these little C shapes that are cut in it, it looks like somebody took a hole punch and went.
Somebody's been making confetti.
Somebody's been making plant confetti in our garden and in our nursery, but that's from a leaf cutter bee. That's not going to hurt this plant. It's going to shed those leaves in the fall, and we'll continue to step these up and keep these happy throughout the growing season.
Or they'll be in the giveaway.
Or they'll be in the giveaway. But I talk about having some aesthetics and threshold of tolerance from a nursery management standpoint. We don't like to spray a lot of insecticides on things here. We don't like to have to use fungicides or those sorts of things. In our glass house, we may lean in that direction a little bit, but that's something that we're going to tolerate this time of the year. And if you're shopping for plants in a garden center and you see that, that's not something to get angry and walk away from. That's a deciduous plant. It's going to drop those leaves. It's not going to hurt or impact this plant in any way. It's just Mother Nature doing her thing, despite us and around us. But things to look for.
And know your insect and your insect damage. A lot of insects, like that's very distinct. You know exactly what that is.
Yep.
So if you can kind of learn your basics of what you're going to see, it's more explainable than, oh, why does this plant look ugly? Well, it's leaf cutter season. I think this was one of my goody salvias. I don't remember which one it is. Oh, he's a little pot bound. This is a little more. Salvias are very vigorous.
That's healthy.
Yeah, like it is very vigorous. This pot is goodness, I don't know, probably June I potted these up.
Yeah, that sounds about right. That's not that long ago.
It's really not that long ago, and it's already showing signs. Now, because it's a dang salvia, it'll be fine. Just break these up.
And we're not going to spend a lot of time stepping that up into another pot. We're just going to be kind of wasting our time and soil with something like that.
Yeah.
And with that being a salvia, with how vigorous that is, honestly, I feel like you could take cuttings off. You could buy that at a nursery, take cuttings off that right now, have a whole nother plant by the time they get dormant.
A couple plants, yeah.
You might be able to even stick this in some water. Like you may not even need rooting hormone as vigorous as this is.
Yeah.
Are we in a place for questions?
Yeah, sure. We can do that. Okay, so Jared says he's found abelias tend to have root balls much smaller than the top of the plant when they're in pots. Are there any other plants like that to be aware of so that he doesn't freak out when he plants it and all the dirt falls off the root ball?
Azaleas are known for that. There used to be a pot called an azalea pot that was more shallow that they would step them up in. That's usually the case when I've seen azaleas. And this one, when I pulled this out of the pot, it did exactly that. You can see that's kind of shallow, and there's a good bit of soil left inside of there. That's nothing to freak out about. Those are the only two that stand out that I know for a fact are kind of shallow. And some of that too goes back to having multiple cuttings in a pot. There's just a lot of top to have to feed that root inside of that small pot.
Okay. Jean wants to know if you can use either pine bark mulch or hardwood mulch in pots.
I think they're going to be too coarse and too heavy.
We don't use mulch, so it's pine fines. You can also you'll see it called soil conditioner.
Yep.
A lot of times it's aged more than like hardwood mulch. I know in other parts of the country they use different woods. We have pine bark readily available, and that's what I know.
Sure.
And you want those new roots to have contact with soil. With mulch or wood chips, there's going to be a lot of air particles, and that's not going to be conducive to something building up a root system.
Yeah.
I've been asked before. I just had a tree company dump a load of wood chips in my driveway, and I'm going to pop my plants up in it. That's too coarse of a material.
It's also fresh material.
Yep.
Fresh material tends to
be hot.
It can be hot, but it can also bind up your nutrients.
Yeah.
So I know that's one conversation that they've had with mulch.
Yep.
Is it going to be a nitrogen lock? Well, it breaks down.
I've used mulch and wood chips to kind of overwinter bare root plants because that holds enough moisture on bigger tree roots, but it's not something you want to pot into, no.
I will say this is great for the nursery trade. For the average homeowner who's maybe potting up some cuttings that they've grown out, I would just go with a bagged media. Go with a peat or peat alternative, and pine bark mix. It's usually labeled like forest products or something, because this is really meant for like Greg said, daily waterings. So I have automatic irrigation in pretty much all the nursery. And it's really meant for like a production level rather than like you, average homeowner. Because you don't want to have to water your plants daily.
No.
So like for you, if you want to water like.
And that's something to think about when selecting potting mix if you're doing this at home. We try to steer people away from anything with peat in it because peat isn't harvested sustainably, but and stay kind of in that organic realm. But find something and ask at your garden center, something that's going to have that happy medium between draining well so that the pots aren't wet, like this was when I pulled it out, that drain well, but also keep you from having to water so frequently. A really good friend of Mark and I, Scott McMahon in Atlanta, he used to have a nursery, and he found a particular soil mix that he used because he was only at his nursery a couple days a week, so he didn't want to have to go there every single day because it was so far from outside of Atlanta. And I thought that was really smart to come up with something that worked kind of in your favor. And there's a lot of different things out there to pick and choose from.
Yeah, and then know your pot size. So like these pots, smaller pots, probably going to need to be watered daily if they're outside. If they're not outside, maybe not. But bigger pots, like you might get away. I've got, a collection of plants that might be sitting on my front porch. And I water them a couple times a week. I don't water them daily unless it's super hot, in which case.
And if you've got something like this in your garden, and I know that I do, because I'm in that plant hoarding stage, both here and at my house, that's going to have to get watered probably a couple times a day. If you've got this at home and if it's in the sun or something, there's just too much root mass there to not keep watered. Put this thing on the ground, put it out of its misery, and let it be happy and let it be free.
This is also probably hydrophobic. So it's never going to fill up and hold that water as when it was freshly planted. When
it was a young thing.
Before it got lost.
One thing I meant to mention, now that we've cleared away, I can see some props. We're not going to sign an allegiance with any of, there's a lot of high quality plant material out there. We do some work with choice plants. We've got some that we've selected. So looking at, from a quality standpoint, plants that have gone through some of these evaluation processes, people ask me all the time, what should I buy? And we can't really say this is one to go with. There are really, really good ones, and most of those have gone through some kind of evaluation process. That's something to consider too. But choice plants are ones that we have an
Those are ones that we've had really good success here with at the Arboretum. So if you're local and in our region, there are things
those are ones to look for. They're going to be good quality.
And it's mostly our local nurseries growing them, and so we always like to support them.
Awesome. Jen is wondering if the anaerobic odor is sort of sulfuric.
She could come up.
I wish we could do smell-o-vision.
Right.
It's
vaguely sulfuric.
Vaguely
you
rotten.
could definitely say that.
Yeah. Take some really old socks, put them in some heavy clay soil, maybe some banana peels, maybe some apple cores, and sit that on your porch for a couple of days, and that might be sort of kind of close.
Way grosser than
way grosser.
Yes.
My imagination might have gotten away from me a little bit there.
There's no banana peels involved.
No banana peels, no.
If you pull your plant out of your pot and it smells gross, that's wrong. It's a plant. It should smell like the earth. It should smell like nature.
Or the plant. Some roots, some plants have super fragrant roots.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
For sure. But if you're pulling something out and it smells not good, then that's a good indication that it is not a happy and healthy environment.
And if you're at a nursery and you see that, you might want to go shop someplace else.
Totally. Stephanie wants to know if it is beneficial for the plant to add coffee grounds when you're repotting them.
As a fertilizer?
As a
potting media?
So if we're repotting a plant, I guess just adding coffee grounds to the potting media. The question would be why would you do that? What are you hoping to achieve by doing that?
There's all sorts of talk that that coffee grounds can be beneficial as far as different insects and funguses and stuff like that. And I've not seen anything consistent on it.
Sure.
In my years of working in research-based places, I've never seen anything that says that's something to add to your plants to improve health or vigor. It's something to add to your compost pile.
Yeah.
It's not something that I would, that I've heard of eggshells, I've heard of potash, I've heard of like cleaning out your fireplace and adding that into your soil and your garden soil. Those are not science-based things that we recommend to people, no.
And it's a very different thing to put a plant in the ground than it is to put it in a container.
Yes.
So like maybe you've heard you can put coffee grounds in your garden beds, but I really don't think anybody said you ought to use that as a potting substrate.
I would not do that, no.
Yeah, just from like a structure perspective, it seems like they're too fine.
It's too dense.
Yeah.
And you're going to lose your airspace.
Yeah.
You want a bigger particle.
And there might be some acidity there too.
Sure.
Yeah, it's probably not going to hurt.
Yeah.
But it's kind of, when I hear stuff like that, yeah, like it's not going to hurt, but why do it?
That's
like
how I feel about it.
It's not anything consistently beneficial.
No.
Okay, so I'm not sure I understand this question, but it's Anthony's saying, so if media is hydrophobic, can you slice into it to open it up? He says root bound and media is solid.
That'll certainly help, but taking something like...
Oh, okay. To just like kind of cut open the root ball to help with water penetrating down into it?
That'll help when you plant it. That'll loosen up all of this stuff.
Yeah.
I wouldn't take this, slice it up, and stick it back in this small pot and expect any long-term results.
Fair.
If I weren't going to plant this immediately, I would step it up in a bigger pot. I would loosen up all of this stuff and give it some more soil for those roots to grow into, and then plant it relatively quickly. It's not going to give you any long-term results. No, it might help in the short term, but there are so many roots here. There's so much tissue here that needs to use the roots to pull moisture and nutrients up, that any of that slicing that you do is just going to fill back in with more roots in theory. The best way to fix this is to put it in the ground.
Yeah. And I feel like if you're at the point where you're thinking about slicing into a really dense root ball, then you're at the point to either repot it or plant it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Or sometimes, depending on the plant, if it's not something super precious, it might be time to start over.
Yeah, for sure.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Because there's a decent chance, based on this root ball size and the top of the plant, it might survive, but it may also die when we plant it because it just can't sustain itself.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's a good point.
Here's a question that's surely impossible to answer. Sandy wants to know, what was the plant Greg held up after the Amorphophallus, if you can ID? My memory, I can't. What? No. Let's just assume it was that chartreuse. I guess it's a platycladus there.
That might actually be what it was.
That might be what it was.
That's my best guess.
That's the best guess we got. It's a platycladus.
Orientalis.
Coral queen.
Coral queen.
Coral queen. Well, that is surely the question they asked about, and there's your question answered, Sandy. He says, winking, tongue in cheek a little bit. Anyway, hopefully that was it. Okay. Anthony wants to know, what do you do with all of the media that you pull off? Can you put it into the ground with the plant?
We
can.
You can, but you want as natural as the site soil in there as possible. Because what ends up happening, and this is getting in a tree shrub planting tangent, is you're creating another pot. If you take out the natural soil, you put your plant in there, you put in some soilless mix or some soil conditioner, you're just creating another pot. Those roots are going to be happy in that loose stuff. You want those roots to grow into the natural soil, so you want to do everything to encourage that to happen. From our perspective, from a nursery perspective, when we're doing this, all this stuff goes back into it gets composted.
Cool.
So it's getting recharged and reused from that perspective. We're not going to take this stuff and reuse it in other pots. There's going to be insects. There's going to be diseases. There's big hunks of roots, pieces of plants. Good Lord knows how many weed seeds.
The particle size has reduced, so fresh. I didn't pull any fresh, but the particle size on this is probably 1/8 inch to a 1/2 inch. And that breaks down.
And this is going to hold, because it's compacted and broken down so well, it's going to be too wet.
Yeah. I think chucking it in a compost bin is probably the best idea.
That's what we recommend.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so Robin wants to know if pine fines are good to mix with my heavy Orange County clay when planting trees and shrubs.
I think we just talked about that.
Yeah, sort of
That's a you
vaguely.
question, Greg.
Again,
I can answer this one since
Go.
we're doing Bryce's planting class
Yep.
right now, basically. So one of the things that Bryce likes to impart upon people is think about the whole with W rather than the whole with an H. So like, don't be thinking about
like that.
the hole itself that you're digging, how big that needs to be. Rather, look at the bed in which you're going to plant your plants. Don't dig a hole and then think, oh, I need to amend the backfill and all that stuff, because that's going to have a bunch of issues with like texture between the interfaces and all that kind of stuff. Rather, amend your bed and get a bed with nice, good soil in it. And then it doesn't matter how big you need to make the hole, all this other stuff. That is for the best. And as far as mixing in the pine fines, you don't necessarily need to do that. You can honestly just top dress about 1 inch every single year, and it breaks down naturally over time. And if you just do that consistently every year, mulching with pine fines, it breaks down, it contributes to the structure of the soil, the organic matter in the soil,
Organic matter.
all,
See, because
all that good stuff.
this broken down in the ground would be awesome.
Yeah.
Like this as a mulch, I still wouldn't reuse it
No.
from the pot.
No.
But if you're talking about buying a bunch of media or a bunch of pine fines and mulching with it,
Yeah.
that's what I would say too.
And I said 1 inch, not 3 inches, because the idea is to have it break down every single year so that what you're putting on is broken down and contributing. It's not building up. It's not waiting to decompose. It's actively growing. So if you're thinking about adding pine fines, by all means do that. Do this top dressing thing rather than thinking about just make it a part of your gardening practice every year. And then eventually you'll have really delicious, awesome soil that basically anything can go in.
I like the hole with a W.
Yeah.
I like that too.
Our friend and ally Barb Fair says the same thing when planting trees.
Yeah.
Just to think about connecting things together.
For sure.
Yep.
Love it. Okay. Jared wants to know, when is North Carolina going to be cool and allow its nurseries to ship Baptisia arachnifera out of state? He wants one.
I think Jared has asked too many questions today.
That's Anthony. I don't think we've heard.
Jared, that's two.
Jared.
I don't know the answer to that.
Is that a federally endangered? Yeah.
Yeah.
That is.
That's
Mark's
why.
here. Maybe he wants to add because I got nothing. It's federal. I don't know.
That's not just North Carolina. I know our good friends down in Aiken, South Carolina. What's the nursery? Bob Woodlanders. They won't sell any federally endangered plants from South Carolina up.
They can't. It's not legal.
It's not legal.
North Carolina, it's federal.
It's federal.
Yeah,
It is not that they don't want to.
That
it is
is why.
illegal.
That is why.
I don't necessarily.
I wonder if this is Jared that we know in Texas.
You might. It's a possibility. Okay, and I believe this is nope, it's Jared in PA.
Okay.
Well, okay.
You can always come visit, buy it at a local nursery, and take it with you.
Yeah, for sure.
That's how that
That
works.
seems like that would be a better.
We would love to have you down here, Jared.
Absolutely. So I believe this is the final question, but Sandy wants to know if we can get a demo discount on these plants. But I feel like with the free plant giveaway, that might be the ultimate discount one can get on these.
Yeah, these are gonna go. I'm gonna repot these up, and they'll go back into my stash.
Sure. And then our free plant giveaway is the first Saturday in October, and that is available to all of our members. So if you become a member of the J.C. Raulston Arboretum, you can come out to our garden on that day and get free plants. Last year, I believe it was about 9 plants on average everybody got, which in and of itself pays for the membership. Just saying, it's a thing, and it is a fun, enjoyable.
All shapes and sizes plants. You could probably get that azalea.
It'll
Honestly.
probably still be around.
Maybe we'll let that one go.
Maybe. Oh, and Jenny did have a question with the ITEA you were showing. She was wondering if you should cut off the suckers when
No,
you,
it's a suckering shrub. So
Yeah.
you want it to sucker because
Yeah, you
it
do.
spreads out and fills out and throws up those suckers. This is not like a root sucker from a rootstock. This is a
Correct.
sucker from the plant.
yes,
So that is your plant growing.
that's its natural growth habit. Those things have a reputation for filling in spaces.
Yep, this one's a sweet one. I like this one.
Okay. Well, that is all the time we have for today. So thank
Went
you,
by quick.
Greg. Thank you, Sophia, for pulling together all these plants and all these tips and tricks for analyzing them and figuring out what the best ones in the garden center are. Oh, and thank you everybody for joining us on the midweek program today. We hope you will be with us next week at 3 o'clock. We are going to be having Greg do lesions, cankers, and burls. Oh my! Which we like the title more than maybe the topic, but it should be a good one. So we hope you will join us for that. We will see you all then. Y'all take care.